Hi, welcome to Ed Talks. My name is Harold Jansen. I'm the Board of Governors Teaching Chair here at the University of Lethbridge. My guest today is Mark Pijl Zieber from the Faculty of Health Sciences. Welcome to Ed Talks, Mark.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your teaching career. So when did you come to the University of Lethbridge and what kind of courses do you teach here?
I grew up in Lethbridge, so I'm certainly familiar with Lethbridge. Spent a number of years in Vancouver. I began teaching nursing in Vancouver and came to Lethbridge in 2002. And so now I've been here almost 13 years, 14 years. And have greatly enjoyed being back here at the University of Lethbridge.
What kind of teaching do you do in health sciences?
I teach primarily in the nursing program. It is an undergraduate BN degree, as well as I teach a bit in the public health program, part of the Faculty of Health Sciences.
So do you do more of the classroom stuff or the clinical or a bit of both?
Mainly classroom now.
Okay.
In years past, I did do clinical practicums as well.
What kind of approach do you take to the teaching that you do in your classes? Do you like a lot of active learning? Do you like to do a lot of lecturing? Do you do online blended learning? What kinds of things do you like to do in your classes?
I like to do a wide variety of techniques. I think that any one technique will get stale after a while. But I do certainly try to do as interactive activities as possible. I usually start off with a sort of a large group interactive kind of discussion with students on material that's going to be new to them. Then I often will have a small group kind of discussions, and then I just sort of circulate around to various. I also try to include a lot of online material and even what we describe as blended learning. I will often start off with students going online, finding resources and evidence that pertain to the class. Then we come to class, actually deal with the content. And then sometimes I'll even have, depending on the particular class, where they then go back online afterwards and have a bit of an interactive discussion about the topic of the week. And students, I find, tend to like that. They like the diversity, and often with small groups, it honestly is a bit hard for students to focus, where in these online groups, they're absolutely focused, which I find it works really well. So
you're focused on discussion and having students finding resources. So what's your thinking behind that? I mean, there's lots of different ways you can approach things, and obviously you've probably tried some and had some work well and lost well. So what's your thinking behind getting students to sort of come up with their own resources?
You know, I find that if there's any way that we can motivate students to really engage with the learning process, sounds a bit idealistic, but it really does work. And I think by getting students to go and find their own materials and evidence before class, it certainly kind of sharpens their minds to the topic. And as well, too, knowledge is always changing, and they tend to get a lot of the best, most current evidence. And it makes for great discussions, because to be honest, often the textbook resources can be at least a few years old, which in today's reality is it dates so quickly. And so we have the best discussions with where comparing a new article versus what was, let's say, in their textbook readings. It's just fantastic. So,
what kind of class sizes do you typically have?
We are very luxurious in health sciences because we are a professional program. Our class sizes tend to be in about the 30 to 35 student range, which I will completely admit is rather luxurious. It's because of just the professional nature. Our size is actually mandated by the government. We can't have large sizes. But it does...
Do you think that we get them to pass laws for other parts of the university like that?
Oh,
that sounds ideal.
I know. So I always feel slightly bad talking to other members when they're doing, certainly in large groups, it changes the kind of teaching techniques you can use. So it's very nice when you have groups of 30, 35. You can split them up into very manageable groups, and it's just a lot easier to be interactive. I'm always in awe of people who actually can do, 200 size classes and be really interactive. It's a true skill. So we are, it's an idealistic teaching situation. We can use a lot of different techniques because of just the class size. It is very nice that way. And it's very enjoyable then because you can do a lot of very interactive, you can easily split them into groups. We primarily teach in the classrooms where there's movable tables. And so you can easily split them into groups, move the actual layout of the room around a lot, which is actually very nice. It's very enjoyable.
So I do some of that when I get to teach smaller classes as well, splitting them into groups. How do you manage the problem? And the thing that I always find is I have them working in groups, and then we want to share what the groups are doing back in the class. And I just find it takes a lot of time to get through that. What are some of the techniques or strategies and how you've dealt with that? Or maybe you don't run into that problem.
No, absolutely. I entirely get what you're saying. Learning is time consuming, so I guess one of the things I try to do is make sure that I have enough space for that kind of learning to happen. Is it easy? No. Does it happen every time? No. But generally speaking, it's, you can sort of design your teaching content and your approaches so that there's kind of discrete blocks throughout the time frame. I do admit in health sciences, we tend to have 3-hour classes because our students are off campus in their clinical practicums on at least 1 to 2 days a week. And so therefore we actually have to have 3-hour classes. And I mean, the length of the class, you have to be creative to keep their attention.
Absolutely.
But it's rather nice because you can really get a groove and a flow going with the class. You can go from one teaching technique to the other. With a 1-hour class, there always is going to be a bit of, I'll sort of call it fudge time, where it's getting everybody engaged and then kind of the wind down at the end. And so when you have a 3-hour class, it's a little less significant because you can actually do a bit more. And that is, I think, an advantage to the way our classes are set up. Now, the downside is you have to fill the time.
Absolutely.
You have to make sure that there is teaching activities, but with good teaching design, it's not a problem. You just have to make sure that you're not doing one thing too long,
So you mentioned you do a lot of big group discussions with 30, 35 students, and I like to do that a lot in my classes too. Do you get pretty good uptake? Do you get a large number of students participating, or do you find there are some that like to sit off in the corner and just keep their head down, or how do you approach that?
There always is, and I always try to encourage students. I try when I do my orientation on the first day to be very clear that if there is an answer that, even if it's plainly wrong from an evidence perspective, I'm not going to jump on them or say, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I try to be very conscientious not to embarrass students, or if they do say something that's not as correct, I want to see them processing through the issues and questions. I never ask them a question which is, what's the right answer?
Right.
I say, what is your thoughts about this? Or you are looking after a particular patient or patient group. How would you manage this? What would you do about it? And they will, and usually they'll rarely be completely wrong. They'll usually have a piece. They'll be sorting it through in their minds. And so then one person will say something, then I'll use a term such as, okay, anybody else have anything to add to that? And we'll sort of go through, and often I'll add my piece to the context. The students often will have lots of knowledge. What they won't have is the practice experience and the contextual pieces. So I try to make sure to fill those pieces in. But it's a really enjoyable way to teach, actually, when you can kind of weave through the information and get them to struggle with the issues and questions without embarrassing them, you know, And I mean, that's a great way to kill discussion, is to, you know, laugh or mock at a student or something like that. It's just a killer.
I always tell people if they want to lead class discussions, if your goal is to show that you're the smartest person in the room, you're not going to have very good discussions,
Nope.
right? It's, you're the guide, right? You're supposed
Yeah,
to help
exactly.
It too. Have you always taught this way, or did you try more traditional lecture techniques and evolve to this, or is this the way you always like to approach things?
Yeah, you know, I think it's kind of the way that my brain is wired. I like having conversations with people. I like struggling and, you know, talking about issues. I love courses where there is, you know, contentious issues and problems, I think, which is funny because a lot of my particular teaching right now is it's a third and fourth year medical surgical theory, which is, you know, fairly concrete often.
Right, yeah.
But there's lots of variations within how practice enacts these, you know, biological realities. And so that's where I really try to focus the discussions. I try not to get students to just regurgitate pure facts, because honestly, they can go on a laptop or a textbook or something and just get those raw facts. But what are they going to do about it? I always try to focus, especially in my smaller group activities, to answer the question of, you are a practitioner in a whatever practice setting, what are you going to do? So they have to focus on the actual enacting and application of that knowledge. You know, the raw knowledge is great and it certainly is valuable, but what they're going to do about it is what's going to really make them an effective practitioner and decision maker within the health system.
Well, and so much of healthcare, from what I've seen, it is a lot of working in teams and working in groups.
Very much.
And so learning how to engage in those discussions is actually a really important professional skill.
Absolutely. And although there is a expanding knowledge base of facts, I would have to say that the majority of modern healthcare is very complex and very messy, and there's not clear answers. I mean, the really clear answers, you know, sure, there's some things as far as basic biology, chemistry, human sociology that a person, a practitioner has to know. But the majority of what's going to actually, you know, involve their career is making those complex decisions with some tricky issues, you know. And again, I tell my students that the reason that they are in a undergraduate bachelor nursing program is because the health system is going to want them for their decision-making ability, not just because of their pure ability to do certain skills. I mean, yes, there's certain parts of that, but there's actually other practitioners that often do those skills better. And a graduate bachelor educated nurse is going to be there for their decision-making ability. So I try to focus the teaching on that end result, I guess. So
I guess that explains why so much of healthcare are real pioneers in problem-based learning and things like that in the educational process. Is that still the case?
Indeed, yes. No, I mean, nursing and all of the health disciplines have certainly evolved immensely over the last 20, 30 years. And the whole problem-based learning, which looks at contextual questions and how to actually solve questions, is one of those sort of developmental things that nursing has certainly gone through. And yeah, the ability to have practitioners that can deal with complex questions and provide answers is very fundamental to, I think, any professional practice program.
What's the balance between, I mean, there's a bit of a tension from what I'm hearing you say between there is a degree of factual knowledge and a set of skills you need to have to be a nurse.
Yeah.
But then there also is this more nebulous solving problems, dealing with things you don't know. What's the balance in teaching between those two things? Because, I mean, you want students to have a certain degree of just that basic skill level, but at the same time, that they have to have more than that. So how do you balance those and how you design courses and teach and design curriculum?
Yeah, as far as, I mean, it's impossible to quantify it really, but certainly in how I actually design my teaching approaches is certainly, I suppose, as it goes to the kind of evaluations that I have, or I guess it's a combination of the evaluations I have for students, plus also then the sort of the learning activities. For instance, I often set up my course where there is a content-specific quiz before each of our class days. On occasion, I will use online quizzes or sometimes in-class quizzes, you know, it depends. But then, and I sort of tell the students that this quiz deals with the material that they've covered in the first 2 years of their program, as well as the textbook readings. And then from that point, I design the rest of the class so it takes from that knowledge level and moves forward into more complex kind of questions. So I try to get the students to be really comfortable with that basic knowledge level that they should have had already. And you know, with time, it's hard. Retention is difficult.
Oh, absolutely.
So I kind of force them to engage with that knowledge level content before they come to class. Then actually in class, we have a bit more freedom to deal with some of those more issue-centered kinds of things. And yes, we cover knowledge, but it's certainly then I can put it within a context of what they already know. Because these are third and fourth year students. I try to be cautious not to focus too much time on what I would consider to be basic introductory information, because they do have it. That being said, I always try to do a bit of a review, but I always with this review try to just do it so it's context specific, and then it leads into what we're actually going to talk about. And I find that a good way to sort of ladder knowledge, I guess. It's sort of the approach that I use.
And here's where using a combination of online and in-class techniques works very well, because
Yes.
those online techniques are very, very good for delivering content and even assessing some of that basic stuff.
Exactly.
And you can take care of that before class.
Yeah, I certainly find one of the techniques I do use is to get my students to go out and actually find a piece of current evidence that talks about whatever the topic of the week is. And so often they're getting a lot of the most current information. I think I mentioned earlier about the whole text versus that knowledge changes so
Right,
quickly.
yes.
And so they're getting a lot of the most current knowledge out there, and it makes for a great discussion. And it gets them to really engage with the current realities of the topic. And so, yeah, it's enjoyable kind of teaching, you know, that way. And provides so that then when they get to class, they have actually a bit of comfort and context for it. So.
Well, it also teaches them some of those skills that they're going to need, which is also evaluating research and evaluating sources, because
Yes.
there's always new research being generated, but learning to be a critical consumer of the information that we get is an increasingly important skill in an information-rich world that we live in.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and it's absolutely true that, you know, the fact that students can go and find information is not a problem anymore,
Exactly.
as it was 20 years ago or something. It's literally a matter of sorting through the knowledge and being able to kind of judge and contextualize the knowledge. So for instance, when I'm actually evaluating students' ability to go get this information before class, a fairly minor fraction of the grade for this assignment is that they can actually go out and find it. I remember when I first started, I think I gave almost like 50% of this whole assignment was just the fact that they could go out and find something, because it actually did take a fair bit of effort to go and find information. They had to actually go to the library.
Yeah, exactly. Through
You
the
know?
doors, right?
Oh,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Exactly. Whereas now the fact that they can either use a Google Scholar or there's just so many sources, or the online databases, it's just incredible. So I don't give very many grades for the fact that they can go find something. What I get them to do is to actually either post or do a persistent link to the actual piece of evidence. then do what I call a scholarly rationale, which is about a page, and where they actually are explaining the reasons why they actually chose this and what it actually then adds to the knowledge, to the topic, and what it may add to the learning of them and their colleagues. And I find that's a good approach. Students, they seem to like it. It's sort of, it engages with their thinking process, and it's way more interesting to grade as well. So,
do you have them do that for every class? Or
yes,
just,
actually.
wow.
So
that must be a lot of grading. That's the first thing when I hear you do that. That'd be a lot to sort through.
well, I give them official feedback at midpoint,
Okay.
and then a final grade at the final. So
For the cumulative thing. they've
yes,
done.
indeed.
Okay.
So it's
So
truly
you're not having to do it every week.
no.
Okay.
It is actually a cumulative,
Okay.
and I do look at the online postings every week, and I actually am a member of these small groups, and so I can often engage with them. But I give them official feedback at midpoint on ways they can improve their postings. I also give them a fair bit of help with even some of the format. I don't want them to struggle with the format. I want them to struggle with the actual content.
Yeah.
And so that's how I set that up. And
Do you
give
find
them,
students get better at it over the course of the term?
And
or
they
just,
do.
Just the practice?
they really do actually. I tell students that with this particular assignment, it's not the kind of assignment that really stresses out their brain, but it's the kind of assignment that they just have to, on almost a formative sort of way, they just have to be very consistent all term long with engaging with the content, and students that are really engaged with the online discussions, they have the potential to do really well. And I mean, I have other ways in my evaluations that actually try to engage with various other kinds of learning. But as far as that sort of formative, ongoing sort of engagement with the content, that's sort of how I focus that part of the evaluation. I do have a formal kind of hand-in assignment, which is, it's not a paper, but it's sort of a practice-based integration assignment. And so I try to be diverse in my evaluation techniques so that it challenges students, and it also allows students that have various learning styles to actually shine a bit in areas that they are strong. If you, let's say, only have paper assignments, only the students that are really good with that rhetorical skill are going to do well. As opposed to if I had only quizzes or tests,
right.
Certain students who are good at that way of thinking. So I try to do a wide variety of sort of evaluation techniques, this sort of formative quizzes, and then sort of a formal hand-in assignment.
Do you give them a choice, or do they all have to do all the different kinds? I know in some...
They have to do all of the three types, but what they do within them, there's a wide variety.
Okay.
Like they choose which piece of evidence or article or I actually call them assets because I want them to be a variety of things. Right. And they can choose the area that they want. And this is a fourth year medical surgical course. But I tell students, if you want to do a slightly different area that's more close to your passion, fine, that's great. Like, that's not an issue at all. Most students do something close to the topic, but again, there's so much diversity within healthcare that it's not difficult to do whatever their area of interest is, community health, public health, within the same context of whatever the unit happens to be, you know.
So you're teaching in what we would call a professional faculty. You're
Yes.
training people for a specific profession. And I said, argued, the teaching there is a little, well, maybe I'm assuming this, but how does that differ from teaching in more traditional academic disciplines like history or English or chemistry or something like that? Are there different considerations that you have to put into designing courses, the way you're approaching students, just the way you deal with the teaching problem?
The tongue-in-cheek answer is that at the end of the process, our students get jobs. But, but no, that's simple.
That's a cheap shot.
Sorry. You know, without question, I love teaching students from other disciplines because I do an online course where I do get students from across the university. And I love the perspectives. In fact, it's our students tend to be very focused on the end result. And that certainly drives what we do. It drives our teaching approaches because at the end of the day, these students have to write a certification examination. And although it's not a university exam, it's something we need to be aware they're heading towards. And that they're heading towards a professional career. And there is definite subtle differences as opposed to a person that's heading towards a liberal education. I am a huge proponent of liberal education, but without question, there's certain compromises in a professional school that we have to enact. Our students do not have as much choice as some of the other non-professional faculties in how they develop and weave through their program because our students have to cover certain content. So there's absolute pros and cons to both perspectives within the university. I mean, yes, it is nice that our students are very motivated because they know that they are facing a professional licensure examination and a professional practice. And we try as much as possible to instill those sort of liberal arts values within them. And I mean, within our program, there is some electives that they have to take across all of the faculties, the general liberal arts. Sometimes the students question the value, but you know, we certainly see in practice that our students coming out of the University of Lethbridge are able to think broadly and able to make complex decisions, which is that whole liberal arts philosophy. Without question, our students come in knowing exactly what they want to do when they finish, you know, which is certainly it's a value to that. I really admire students that come in into traditional liberal arts programs where there isn't necessarily you know, a job at the end of it. There's evidence that say, you know, given a little bit of time, they all do very well. Absolutely. A university degree always is a benefit to students. Our students do have a bit of an advantage in that at least there's a pretty clear endpoint. And yes, it does drive our teaching, there's no question. We have to meet certain professional standards, which drives our curriculum without question. It's just something you have to be aware of. And because of all of us who are teaching within the program also do have actually professional licensure status, it's pretty comfortable. It's not that difficult really. But without question, it lends itself very well to interactive, case-based or problem-based type of learning approaches because that's what they're going to do. They're going to be managing cases, they're going to be solving problems. And it's a very enjoyable way to teach, so I have no problem with that link. So,
do you have to also pay attention, because it would seem to me part of what you have to do is socialize people into thinking like a nurse or thinking like a certain kind of professional. There's also
absolutely.
a professional persona that you have to start getting. And so in the discipline that I teach in, I don't know, some of my students will become lawyers, some will work for government, some will be reporters, some might become nurses, I have no idea. But they're all aiming for this thing. So I imagine that's a big part of what you're trying to do, is just help to develop the skills and habits and ways of thinking that are going to help them be successful professionals.
Yeah, without question, the first couple years of our four-year degree program, we do focus a little more on actually knowledge acquisition. And as the program goes on, then we start looking at more complex kinds of thinking, the application, analyzing situations, And because, again, that's what they're going to have to do. And it happens in any program, but with us, I suppose we could even say we have the luxury of having some very real case situations that we know these students are heading towards. It is not difficult to come up with case situations that these students are going to be engaging with. And it makes a great learning environment. It makes it very interesting. And again, these students know they're heading towards a professional practice. And so the more we can make those links to their future professional practices, they really engage with it. And so it's a great way of learning. It's a good fit, you know?
Well, I'm also struck one of the advantages you have. One of the things we'd like to achieve is to instill a desire for lifelong learning, right? But
Yes.
a lot of professions actually require that. You have to maintain your competency.
Absolutely.
And so the skills you're teaching of find sources and critically evaluate them and what do they contribute to your knowledge, stuff you are required to do and report on to your college every year.
Yes.
So you kind of have that built-in institutional incentive there.
It certainly helps, yes, because there is, in fact, it's a government mandated thing that we have to maintain competence and we have to improve our knowledge, improve our skill. So there really is a lot of weight behind teaching our students to learn as opposed to just teaching them to memorize or something like that. I mean, we've gone long beyond that in any of the faculties, but certainly in a professional faculty, because they know that they're going to be engaging with real patients, real people who are in a very difficult time in their life. It certainly motivates the students, and it makes it so that it's not difficult to design good learning activities because there's just so many difficult issues within healthcare. It's just non-stop examples of difficult situations, you know, and it makes it a great way to learn for students.
So that leads naturally to, you wrote a really great article for the Light on Teaching magazine here at the university, which gets at exactly that. You wrote about the challenge of students learning from their mistakes and how that's very different in something like nursing. When my students make a mistake running a regression analysis on some data set, nobody gets hurt, right? The data set doesn't get upset. But for students who are in healthcare, especially in a more clinical assignment, but even ones in class, when they think of the implications of making a mistake on something, the stakes are quite a bit higher. So, I mean, how do you deal with that challenge? Mistakes are one of the major ways we learn things. So how do you balance that? I was very taken by this article, so I'd like you to talk a bit about that.
This article actually came out of my PhD study research, and I have always noticed with our nursing students, and it's very common throughout healthcare, that students are very fearful, very afraid of making mistakes because it does, as you say, have very real clinical implications for the people that they are working with. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever met a registered nurse student who actually didn't want to work with people. And who didn't want to actually provide good care to people. Mm-hmm. So mistakes, they really do kind of challenge that desire to really provide good care to people. And so I noticed this with students, especially in clinical, and it often can be very paralyzing for them. And so my study actually looked at that whole mistake experience with students, and they truly are terrified going into clinical practice because they realize that they do have a very clear and critical influence in these people's lives. I wanted to look at what it is about the mistake experience that was so fearful for students. And it's true that students actually, they come into the process thinking a lot about this possibility. So one of the findings of my study is that we need to help prepare students for the reality of making mistakes. There's a good reason why a lot of the health professions use the term that it's nursing practice, medical practice. It's an ongoing sort of interactive process with patients. It's not a cut and dry question answer. But just mistakes seem to really bring out a lot of very emotional feelings for people. So how to actually prepare students to make mistakes is one of the real big findings. How to actually design learning experiences so that you take away a bit of the power, the negative power of this mistake experience. Now, it's not that we want students to be flippant or casual about clinical practice. And from all my research, that was never an issue with students. No. They take it very serious. Yeah. It's far more the other side, that they can actually get themselves so that fear and anxiety becomes paralyzing for them and will actually then begin to diminish their capability to give good practice. So that was one of the findings that I had for me as an educator is how can we help nursing education? How can we design learning activities that help students engage with this question? One of the big problems I think that we've had in health sciences education, and I think it's actually very true for any professional practice kind of education, is how do we get students prepared for the mistakes that not they may make, that they will make, you know? And it's the reality of that. Mistakes are never pleasant for people. I don't care what it is, you know, history, whatnot. But without question, yeah, the implications when you're working with humans who are in a disadvantaged position is, you know, there's more implications. But the same fear of mistakes is across any discipline, I would say. And how do you prepare students for that? How can we use it as a learning experience? How can we make it so that it is a positive experience? How can we get students to engage with the mistake, not cover it up? Because we're human, we make mistakes, and there's almost been this viewpoint that mistakes should never happen, and it's just simply unrealistic from a pure psychological perspective. It's impossible.
But then it can stop you, the fear of mistakes can actually stop you from doing something effective because...
Absolutely.
So you have to face that fear, right? I mean, that's a
Very
big part
much.
of teaching students.
Have to face the fear and the kind of techniques that they can use to improve their performance when they do make mistakes, how to negotiate the process of dealing with whatever implications that happen, whatever consequences, and facing the fact that mistakes just will happen, not if they happen, when they happen. Just the fact of taking away the power of that negative experience has been actually shown, in fact, to increase human performance. So that was sort of the nature of the article, is how as educators can we design experiences that take away some of that negative power of making mistakes, and how can we get students to actually use mistakes as a learning experience where it actually improves their performance as opposed to actually making it worse, which I had quite a few examples within my research where after students made mistakes that it actually made their efficiency and effectiveness just plummet. Because they were so afraid, so paranoid would be the word, of actually making a mistake or making another mistake. And we just need to take away a bit of that power. And I think that can be designed.
So how do you do that? Did you do that in the design of assignments and support for students, combinations? So what are some of the things that you can do?
Primarily in the support for students, acknowledging that mistakes will happen. It's one of those interesting issues that it's been largely just either ignored or covered up. We just have said in the past that, listen, we don't want mistakes to happen. Like, you know, and we focused it purely on the accuracy, like, you know, be accurate, be perfect, don't make mistakes. And it's just not realistic. And there's lots of ways by saying, okay, how can we step back, look at the whole environmental context and say, how can we improve our practice with the understanding that we're going to make mistakes? So what can we put into place to help us not make mistakes? But then when mistakes occur, how can we then manage it in a way that helps both us as a practitioner and the whole system learn from it and improve, And so we design experiences that help students engage with mistakes so that they can actually face this as just a clinical practice reality before they actually make a real one. So without question, we've been trying to use simulation. And I talk a bit about that in the article as well. And simulation is a perfect way to get students to engage with the realities of practice, including making mistakes. And we're starting to do that, where actually when students make mistakes, we do quite an extensive debriefing, and we do a variety of things to get students to talk through in a safe environment when they actually know that they're not going to be doing physical harm to a person. And it's very effective, and we're trying to do more. That's one of the things, the follow-ups from my research, is to actually look at how do we get students to engage in simulation with this whole issue of mistakes. And we're starting to do, I'm doing a bit of a follow-up study looking at simulation and mistakes, and what they learn from simulation is very effective. And I think it can be used in many, many disciplines. Not quite sure in history how you do it, but I'm sure there's a way we could come up with something. But
I actually teach political science, so what I sometimes do is I'll actually set up assignments, usually involving analyzing data, that will lead them to make a mistake. I'll actually deliberately have them make a mistake to realize that there's a problem, because problems are the interesting things, right?
Absolutely.
When we think we know the answer, and no, that leads us in the wrong direction, and learning from that. But I guess what really struck me from your article, again, is that I'd never really thought about, well, that's a very different implications for when you're dealing with ideas or numbers or some sort of analysis, versus even in a simulation where you think, well, what would have happened had this been real life, right? The stakes are quite a bit higher. And it really got me thinking about the role of mistakes in education. So I'd recommend people read your article, even if you're not teaching in health sciences, because it really got me thinking about how important mistakes are in the educational process.
Thank you. It was an interesting project to work on. I really enjoyed it, actually. I think I like research that has the ability to change practice and to help students be more effective, which I think this clearly is. It will allow them to engage with the reality of mistakes, to be able to work on the process of how to prevent mistakes, and to not let it paralyze them, not if, but when it happens. And we always tell students that it's not if, it's when. And so therefore, how are you going to deal with it and manage the situation, as opposed to falling apart? And simulation is great because students can actually get traumatized, even though the situation is clearly artificial. They take it very seriously. And so again, it's one of those things about designing simulation activities so that it allows students to learn, in fact, without being too traumatic. It's possible in simulation to traumatize students. One of those reasons why, especially when you're dealing with contentious issues, that whole debriefing afterwards is so critical. And I know when simulation first really became an educational technique, it's one of the flaws they found, that if you neglect debriefing, you can traumatize your students and make them very nervous when they actually go into clinical practice. So how you design those learning activities is really important. You can't just shock them and then drop them.
From talking to you, I'm struck by the amount of thought you put into designing courses and working at things. And I mean, I think I would probably describe you as one of those people who's a natural teacher. You like teaching, you're drawn to it, and just have an innate ability to connect with students. But I mean, how much of what you do just comes naturally to you, and how much do you have to work at and think very consciously about how you're designing experiences, assignments, courses, and learning opportunities for students?
I think for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, I do really enjoy teaching. I love engaging with students that way, but I have certainly found that if you want to have a particular objective at the end, you have to design it into existence rather than just hoping it's going to happen. And so, for instance, designing so that with many of my courses, they have activities that prepare them for class. Then there's the actual class activities, which I try, for instance, not to make any one activity too long or drawn out, because people psychologically just have a defined attention span.
Absolutely.
And so by changing things up, designing things like that, humans like variety, humans like engaging, and there's no one activity at one particular time that's always going to work. And so changing things up, designing how evaluation happens, when evaluation happens, is, I think, truly one of the things that students expect a university level instructor to be able to design, not just to let it happen. And I think it's one of those things I've seen in both working with good educators, that I've had good teachers throughout my life and career. I think that really sets them apart is that they actually think about and design the learning activities rather than just letting them happen. If you just let things happen, on occasionally they go well, but if you actually designed, again, they won't go perfectly 100% of the time, but they'll go very well most of the time, which is, I think, the true standard. Whereas if you don't design it, you're not going to be an effective educator. And if you don't understand how humans work from a psychological and sociological perspective, you're going to struggle. There's lots of great help, knowing when you can actually draw on people that have even some of the expertise that you don't. It's one of the reasons I so appreciate working with the Teaching Center, and although I think I do have certain abilities, I have used the Teaching Center numerous times to solve various issues and problems because I don't have all the answers. And I think that's a sign of a good educator, in that you learn from others, that you don't stop learning, that you find new resources, new techniques for learning. And to be really honest, it's much more interesting. It doesn't get stale for me. If I taught the same way all the time, I would get bored as well. I'm a normal human being too. I get bored too. And changing things up, when students are engaged, it makes it so much easier to teach, and it makes it so much more enjoyable, So again, it comes down to design, being proactive, updating materials, changing your teaching techniques, not doing the same assignments all the time, keeping fresh with things.
Well, and to tie it back to our previous conversation, it's also being willing to make mistakes as well.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, so what are, if you are willing to share, can you share, have you had an assignment that you thought would work great and failed, and what did you learn from that?
Absolutely. Because I teach a course that is a third-year medical surgical course, it tends to be fairly concrete information, and then the application of it. Like an assignment which is, let's say, writing an analytical paper about an issue is not the best fit. And I remember one term I actually did, because I was, again, trying to kind of change things up a bit. Mm-hmm. So I got the students, I asked them to actually do an analysis of some issue or something. And the students did what they had to, but their motivation was rock bottom. And yeah, it's sort of one of these like, oops, you know. And so assignments that match the tone of the course just work better.
Right.
You know, so I try to do assignments that are very practice focused, that allow students to make those links between the theoretical knowledge that we're covering and then the analytical application to their practice. And I have this one assignment where students actually create a resource. It's where they basically synthesize a large amount of evidence from a wide variety of sources and then combine it into, I call it a clinical resource, which then they can produce, keep in their pocket, or PDA, sometimes people have done electronic ones, and take with them to practice. And students love it because it really engages them with expertise on a particular topic and then gives them something that will make them an expert when they actually go to clinical practice. And the 1 year that I actually didn't do it, on my final feedback, they said, "Can you bring back that assignment?"
They'd heard about it from other
They'd
students.
heard about
Wow.
it from other students, and they said, "Why didn't you do this?" And I go, "Oh, okay, message received." So, you know, how to actually design evaluation techniques. You know, certainly, and I've made mistakes, even in how I grade assignments. I tell students, and I will honestly say I borrow this quote from my wife, and that if I have misunderstood their brilliance, that they can come to me, sit down and make the case why I misunderstood them. And I try to be flexible. Whenever I grade assignments, I essentially make the pledge to students that if they want me to explain my evaluation, that I should, as their paid instructor, have the ability to actually justify and explain why I graded their assignment as I did. And so that's what I do. If students come to me and have very legitimate concerns, I try to be flexible because I make mistakes. And students never expect you to be perfect. They expect you to listen to them, to come from a framework of trying to improve them. If you come with the stance of that you're trying to make them better, they will never have an issue with that.
They're amazingly forgiving, actually.
Absolutely, you know, and even if you do make clear, I remember one time, for whatever reason, just, you know, a little brain kind of, you know, something happened, and I actually was teaching them, and I told them something which was clearly wrong. Just that.
We've all done that.
I know exactly. And later on, I sort of said, "You know what, guys? I think I told you something wrong." And I think someone sort of pointed it out to me, like, they raised their hand and said, "Are you sure?" like that. And all of a sudden I went like, damn. Oh, I got that one wrong.
Yeah.
And so I backed.
But isn't that great that the student caught that?
Oh,
and you can turn
absolutely.
that into a really great moment, right?
And absolutely, you have to be willing. And I think in that time, I literally laughed because I said, "You know, you're absolutely right." So I actually had to take a deep breath, back up and said, "Okay, let me start that over again."
Yeah.
And I actually drew it out on the board. And it actually, they said afterwards that was the first time, because it was a difficult, complex issue. That's the first time it ever really made sense because, number one, I made this mistake, stopped, backed up, went through, made sense to them. And, you know, yeah, we're all humans, including us.
And then you're also modeling to them recovering from a mistake, right?
Absolutely,
Which is
absolutely,
what we do, right? We all mess up.
And honestly, students do not have a problem with that. If you try to hide it or justify it, they do not like that. You know, there's without question in my experience. And if you're real and they know that you're trying to help them get better, and especially with a professional practice program, if they know that you are trying your best to help them be more effective practitioners, they will forgive all sorts of things, all sorts of mistakes, you know. And I try to bring that same perspective into when they make mistakes. And even with when I do those large group discussions and they say something that's really clearly wrong, often I will try to use it as a learning experience as opposed to demeaning them or making it clear that you're wrong or something, to try to make it a learning experience and to be able to say, okay, we got two perspectives here. Okay, what's the right one? And we have a bit of a debate on it.
Yep.
And, there clearly is ways to pursue these issues that don't embarrass students and facilitate them engaging with the discussions and with the content.
I find that even giving feedback on written work as well, because
Yes.
often even you can get a terrible paper or a terrible assignment, but I always try to highlight at least some of the positives,
Yeah.
or say, I can see what you were trying to do here. I
Yeah.
really see, and you were moving in the right direction. And
Yeah.
if you had tried this and this, it might have been more successful, and try to be
Yeah.
affirming of the positive things. that they do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also tell students, sometimes they come to me and they just, for whatever reason, have had difficulties on assignment. And I said, it's kind of unfortunate that these type of assignments just capture one piece of evaluation at one point in time
Right.
and everything. And I said, sometimes this is not a reflection of your best work, and just move on, learn from it
Yep.
what you can, and how can I help you do better in something else,
It's the journey, right? It's not, this is just
Absolutely.
one step along the way.
Absolutely. It's never pleasant to do poorly on an
Nope.
assignment, but it's just reality.
It's just part of the conversation. I view
It
it
is.
as it's a conversation I'm having with my
Yeah.
students, and it's my contribution to it. So
Yeah. And if you're truly trying to help the students learn, they get that, And if you can clearly articulate the rationale that you're applying to a particular situation, they get that,
Yeah.
And especially if you're flexible where you're wrong or you misunderstood them or something, and you give them some credit, being somewhat flexible goes a long ways. So.
Well, thanks, Mark. I appreciate you joining me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.